let me say that I'm pleased to be here, and I think it's the weather is okay for storytelling.
Yeah.
The timing is also okay for storytelling, and there is in my culture or folk tales are not told during the day, because if you tell them, the people who listen and tell stories during the day, then horns will come out of their heads. So it must be dark to be able to tell stories. So I'm sure there's some reason of why this was said. So again, thanks for the project. Let me say that I have spent close to 40 years, 4 decades of my life in Cape Town. And what I want to do is to tell a story about growing up in Cape Town in the 60s, 70s, until when I left to go and work in Johannesburg in January 1998. That's now when I packed everything, Stratford van lines, and we went up to Johannesburg. I have just come back to live in Cape Town as from the beginning of May this year. So on the 3rd of August, I'll be 3 months back in Cape Town. Now, let me just say, 3 weeks ago, a colleague, a friend of mine, who is from Cape Town, who lives in Johannesburg, visited. And we decided to go out on there's something in Cape Town called the last Thursday of the month. So we went to see an exhibition, and she then said, man, what's wrong with this city? You know, where are the people of color? Wherever you go, you know, you don't see people of color. You know, after 6, from many of the public spaces, people disappear. What's happening? So we had some discussion on this, and in a way that made me to start thinking about growing up in Cape Town. And this question of where are the people of color in the city has been raised in political circles. So, you know, politicians sometimes raise it, and sometimes they raise it, I would say, opportunistically. And now that we are on the eve of elections, and I'm sure people have heard this many times. Now, I think it's a real question, but sometimes I find that this question is raised with little reference to history, and with also little reference to what had happened in Cape Town. And I think that it's not too useful, although the people that raise it may be concerned, but without that history, it's going to be difficult to find solutions. Because if you don't go back into that history, the levers for change, you may not be able to pick them up. So let me just say what I understand about growing in Cape Town. This is an urban area, a city in South Africa, where there were deliberate policies to exclude, bar African people from being present in this city. And this was done through various measures. The first measure, or raft of measures, were sort of influx control measures, meaning the regulation of who comes in and who must remain in the city, how long, and all of that. And this was done through pass laws. And sometimes when I tell my kids that in Cape Town, if you come to Cape Town, you had 3 days to find employment. If you don't have employment, you had to go back. If you lose a job, you had no reason to remain in Cape Town. This was the effect of pass laws and other influx control measures. The second policy was the question of what is called the colored labor preferential area. What this meant is that before an employer could give a black African person a job, they had to go through the ladder. The whites, coloreds, and if no one is taking the job from the above groups, then they could give that to black African people. And this policy meant that many people were doing menial jobs, and levels of insecurity were at the highest. The third thing, and then I'll try and weave all of this so that I'm sure you've heard all of this. Where's the personal part of it? So I'll bring in some of the personal part. The third policy, which I think it's important for people to understand, so as to understand Cape Town today, is that the facilities, social facilities for black African people were absent. So right up to maybe about 73, there were only 2 high schools in Cape Town. And if those were full, the kids were offloaded to boarding schools in the Eastern Cape. So a bulk of the children who were born in Cape Town, when they finish matric, when they finish standard 6, then for high school they go somewhere else. Now that did curb the ability of people to be educated, but it did also do other things. Except Christmas, Boxing Day, New Year's Day, the most festive occasions when I was growing up was what was called a send-off, where this was like the time when the students are going back to the Eastern Cape. So you dress up, your best clothes, and then for 2 Sundays, you come to the railway station to see the students who are off to the Eastern Cape. There was also, fourthly, an attempt to block any development of a black African middle class. And if you ask anyone who was here my time, 60s, 70s, right up to 87, only 1 medical doctor was allowed, black African medical doctor, was allowed to practice in the 3 townships. Only 1, Dr. Madigiza. So he had a surgery in Langa, Guguletu, and Nyanga. And so you'll see all these queues of people outside his surgery. So this is just an example of, I think that the sort of new medical doctors came around about 87, and the idea was not to have people, just a professional layer. So I mean, basically the teachers and there wasn't an attorney, a black African attorney. When people say, where are the people of color, or where are the African people, to understand that many of the people, or the majority of people who are now in the city, in Khayelitsha, outside of Nyanga, Langa, Guguletu, many of these people sort of arrived when Crossroads was allowed to remain, because it was about to be bulldozed, and when there was a decision to build Khayelitsha. And so many of these people who are there are sort of first generation residents of Cape Town.